I must speak my truth. Finally? Do we get to do that this week? Did some of you here going through the Mercury retrograde here for the last 3 weeks, and even before that, the setup of like things were said and not said, or you held back because you watched the video and I told you to hold back. And let's say you're one of these people that did that. Is this the week finally, when Mercury's starting to move forward out of retrograde, that you speak that truth? But we will see in this full moon in Gemini that happens on December 4th is all about this. I'll break down the chart, use my annotator with a new purple color. Those little things get me excited. How I'm going to communicate with you all is with the purple annotator. Okay, so there it is, the sun at 13 degrees with the purple arrow. And then there's the moon in Gemini at 13 degrees. We have this amazing full moon that's happening, and Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury. And Mercury is here in Scorpio, 22 degrees, recently starting to move forward, slowly coming out of its retrograde phase. It was there for 3 weeks. It started at 6 degrees Sagittarius, went all the way back into Scorpio, into the depths and probing, investigational, intimate place of Scorpio to try to hyper-focus on certain truths within an emotional level with help with Saturn in Pisces and Jupiter in Cancer to bring this grand water trine emotional story and digging up the past and looking at memories and lineages and all types of things that deal with emotional, really kind of an emotional interrogation that Mercury in Scorpio has done. And here it is now moving forward, the ruler of this full moon with Mars in Sagittarius pushing things here, as Sagittarius likes to do, with no boundaries, seeking its philosophical truth for better or worse. So here's Mercury in Scorpio now. Now, do you finally say it? Do you finally say what's really been on your mind the last couple of weeks? Or are you one of these people that actually did speak your mind in the last several weeks? You spoke it and you really fumbled it, or you really weren't quite together. You didn't have a basis to back up the words. There wasn't a philosophical basis. There wasn't a wider truth to it all. And you needed to figure that out after you bumbled and fumbled your words. Or maybe it was somebody else. Maybe it was a situation at work. Maybe it was a dynamic where it sounded legit, but it really wasn't. And I think Mercury here in the last several weeks had to go back into Scorpio to figure out the basis of things before it goes back into Sagittarius. And we're at this interesting point then this week with this particular chart. Okay, so here it is, Mercury, the focal point, the ruler again of the moon in Gemini, right? And here we have to pay attention to a couple things. First off, you get a little bit of help, just a little bit of help here, because Mercury is on its way to harmoniously trining Saturn here at 25 degrees. It's going to happen officially not too long after this when we go into the weekend. I'll tell you about the weekend here in a second. But here, Mercury's constructing, Saturn's helping Mercury and Scorpio construct its form to crystallize the word, to finally gather up the secret truths that Mercury and Scorpio has discovered, so eventually it can funnel that into the Sagittarian realm when Mercury goes there. Okay, that's pretty good, right? You say, right? Okay, well, we'll throw this in. You know, Mercury is actually on its way to harmoniously connecting with Jupiter here very soon. And mind you, this isn't the first time Mercury's connecting with Saturn and Jupiter in the last month. It's already done it twice. Okay, so it's not like we're clueless here with like what the truth is or what we found out. We did some deep swimming to figure it out the last couple of weeks. So here, we like that setup, don't we? But here's the thing. You know, Mars right now in astrology, Sagittarius, has no filters. And when there's no filters and there's nothing to contain Sagittarius energy, this is where things can get completely blasted out and scattered. Okay, so that is a focal point of this. Now I will add, here are the nodes in 13 degree in Pisces, South Node in Virgo, for those who have been affected by the eclipses that have happened earlier, February, March area this year, and then what happened in September were pretty big. If you are a person that's Pisces, Virgo especially, you are definitely affected by this full moon, okay? And we want to get our facts straight. We need to have some rational measure of here that's going on here. Because in one sense, the Sagittarius energy wants to pontificate. Luckily, we have Mercury here in Scorpio that kind of really is hyper-focused on the truth it's discovered in the last several weeks. So saying that, to bring it all together, first off, if you're a Pisces, Virgo, or a Sagittarius especially, if you're going to say something this week finally, you better have it together. Like, have it together. Don't just like pop off or just say something and have no backing. You better be ready for the debate. You better be ready to prove it or to speak your truth in a way that has fundamental basis to it. Okay? It's not just pontificating out loud. You have a fundamental like structure that's behind it. Your personal code, your personal truth, your personal philosophy. Second, if you're a Sagittarius in general, I don't know if you've picked up or have learned things, especially like your Mercury Sagittarius, is if in the last month, is if you caught a story in your life where, you know, if someone actually called you out in one sense of like, you know, I see through your Sagittarius kind of optimism, or, you know, you're kind of like pushing over a certain type of truth and inflating something else. And people or situations can kind of see right through it. And maybe certain ways that a Sagittarius does things, the timing of when they speak their truth, right? How they do it, the grandiose way of doing it, the foot-mouth syndrome that happens. Hopefully, you figured some of these things out in some ways that you could tweak some of that that's more condensed. Things that happen in mutable signs are great because they have a tendency to juggle one thing to another or two things at the same time, multiple. But when you start to get carried away, everything gets diluted. Everything falls to pieces. You need a container for it or something that keeps it together. And a Sagittarius in the end has to have a system, has to have a rationale that keeps them in line for the vision that they have and what they originally caught a dream and a vision on. They saw one little something in the distance a while back and they focused on it and they set off on a journey for it. And that's great. You have fun. It's going to be great, blah, blah, blah. But when you get sidetracked or things have a tendency to get scattered, you need to get back in line. And that is where Mercury and Scorpio comes into play to help you out, but only if you've done the work the last couple of weeks or you're willing to do it this week, and you use Saturn to help you condense those thoughts. That frame of mind, right, helps you do it. You bring Jupiter in to help you do see the bigger picture, but something that's tangible, that can have results down the line. Okay, there's the deal. That's the deal. Again, if you're an eclipse person affected by Pisces and Virgo, you have that stuff in your chart, this is a wild full moon for you. Same with Sag. I'm just telling you now, please be focused. If you say something or someone else is, be prepared to follow through on the conversations, which brings me to something else that I think is very important here. And, you know, it has to do with listening. And I think for anybody who's Gemini or Sagittarius, there actually could be very great, the great listeners. But for the most part, if there's a lot of movement and surface ways of doing things and not willing to go deep, you'll have a tendency to not hear things. Because a lot of times when we're listening or communicating, we have to actually stop and hear what someone else has to say or what the world has to say. And most importantly, what is being said from within. Not just in your brain, but intuitively, right? Sometimes we catch it on the fly like a Mercury and Sag does. We can catch that intuition within and it's very clear, right? But that's an art. And a lot of times when something like configurations like a full moon here, and there's in particular like the nodes are involved, and Mars and Sagittarius is kind of is out of bounds and no boundaries on it. We want to contain things. That is how I'm thinking about it. So if you're ready to do it, or if you're ready to hear certain types of truths that have been kind of boiling under the surface here in the last month, then go for it. If you happen to be one of these people, come back to this video and you let me know how that turned out for you. For me, I will give you this one last piece of advice. It actually has to do with later after the full moon. Let's just say I pick a day. I'll pick Saturday here that I'll show you, okay? For the last thing. At this point, the remnants of the full moon are still happening, but there's a big difference here, and it has to do with the moon going into Cancer. And this is important because what is said this week and how we go into the full moon, it's what happens after where I think you can assimilate in a way. And the reason is because officially then you'll see Mercury at 24 degrees make its trine to Jupiter and make its trine to Saturn. And we have the third mercurial in Scorpio situation touching Saturn and Jupiter pretty much since the first time happened at the end of October, and then in the middle of November, November 11th, right in the middle of the retrograde. And here's the third time here. And this is where mercurial things are very important. And so we want to make note of this. 6th to the 7th here on the weekend. It is part of the full moon. I think if you're going to say things this week and do it, be prepared for the emotional, whether it's fallout or bonding, okay? When we just leave the Gemini moon for how we're processing emotionally, it's in our mind. But after all that is said, it goes into the Cancer moon, which is a more intuitive, internal way of communicating. So be prepared for something like that. And I think actually that this weekend is where the true magic happens, where the truth is assimilated emotionally after the full moon. And we've had a lot of practice on how to deal with things emotionally and communicate emotionally, be in touch with our feelings after the Mercury retrograde, after these grand water trines here at the end of November. And we have a different emotional truth that solidifies. At least that's my opinion in my eyes. Have a great week, everybody. I want to thank everybody who has supported me this year, members and non-members, you strangers watching. And until next time, I will see you on the next video.